Evolution. Evolution states that biological populations change genetically over time. The knowledge of evolution allows biologists to understand how life diversified and how species interact. It is also useful to help biologists make predictions about the biological world. An example of species interaction is that of bees and flowers. The flower provides the bee with nectar while the bee helps pollinate the flower, as you can see here. Charles Darwin was the first person to explain evolution with scientific evidence by the means of natural selection. In the Galapagos Islands, he found that there were a variety of different finches which varied in the shape and size of their beaks. The finches on the island looked a lot like the finches on the South American shore. It appeared that the finches colonized the islands from mainland South America and then diverged in form. The distance between the islands meant that the finches on the different islands could not interbreed, so over time they became distinct. These observations were key in Darwin eventually developing his theory of evolution. The major propositions that Darwin proposed was what eventually developed the framework of the evolutionary theory. He stated, 1. Species change over time. 2. Divergent species share a common ancestor. 3. Natural selection is the mechanism that produces changes in species. The 5 different forces which have influenced evolution are 1. Mutation, 2. Population size, 3. Gene flow, 4. Non-random mating, and last but not least, natural selection. The origin of genetic variation is mutation. Mutations occur when there are changes in the nucleotide sequence of an organism's DNA. Mutations occur randomly and is by natural selection that acts on the random variation. Mutations are either harmful or have no effect. The harmful mutations are called deleterious mutations, and the ones that have no effects are called neutral mutations. However, if environmental conditions change, the deleterious or neutral mutations can also become advantageous. Take peppered moths, for example. If their homes were to suddenly become polluted, the darker colored moths would be more likely to outlive the light colored moths because they could camouflage more easily in their environment and hide from their predators better than the light moths can. Migration of individuals and movements of gametes between population results in gene flow. Gene flow is when there's a change in allele frequency in a population. For example, if new species were to be introduced in an area where another species already lives, the new species might be able to successfully reproduce with the native species. New traits might arise as a result. This is because new individuals that were able to reproduce in the new location added new alleles to the population's gene pool. If individuals in a population do not choose mates at random, often genotype frequencies in the population might change. A specific type of non-random mating is sexual selection. This is when an organism's phenotype influences its ability to attract mates. For example, female peacocks choose their mates on the basis of how bright its feathers are. Males with brighter feathers will attract more females and are thus more likely to pass on their genes. Natural selection refers to the gradual process in which certain unfavorable biological traits are eliminated and favorable ones are carried on to help organisms better adapt to their environment so that they can continue to produce more offspring. Some factors of natural selection are human progress, environmental conditions, mutations, and many more. One example of natural selection would be these giraffes. The ones with the largest neck will be able to feed on the leaves. Another example involves peppered moths. These moths were affected by human progress during the Industrial Revolution. They were typically pale. When the air became polluted due to the Industrial Revolution, trees and buildings turned black. So only the moths that were darker were able to survive by hiding from predators. But once the Industrial Revolution peak passed, it allowed the lighter moths to make a comeback.
Small populations cause rapid changes in gene frequencies that lead to evolution because organisms are more susceptible to random changes. The small population usually has a tendency to have a smaller gene pool. This initiates evolution because the population interbreeds, which leads to evolution and diseases. One significant result of small population is the founder effect, which is when the population size is reduced with a reduction in genetic variation. This can be illustrated by showing the effects of bottleneck with marbles in a jar. Each generation is represented by pouring out marbles to show that there are more of one kind opposed to others. Hence, there's a reduction in genetic variation. Now that we've covered the basics of Darwin's theory of evolution, there's a few things that enables us to see whether evolution actually takes place. If a population is at equilibrium, evolution does not take place. However, like evolution, several conditions must be met. These equations calculate genetic probability with evolution. As you can see, P represents the dominant allele, Q represents the recessive allele. Otherwise, A is the dominant, P and which is the P, and small lowercase a is the Q, which are the allele frequencies. As you can see in this circle, the black dots represents the black flower, which is the dominant allele, opposed to the white flower, which is represented by the white circles, and the dominant alleles overwhelms the dish. Let's try a Hardy-Weinberg problem together. So in this problem, we are trying to find out what the homozygous dominant allele is. And so we know that black is dominant over white, which is recessive, and it's represented by lowercase b, while the dominant is represented by the uppercase b. So let's make 10 butterflies. In this case, 4 of the butterflies would be white because it's 40%, and 6 of them would be black because then 100 minus 40 equals 60%. So what we have to do is that we're given the Q, which is the recessive allele. So we're given the Q squared, my bad. And so to find Q, we have to find the square root, which is 60.63, and then we have to find P by subtracting it from 1, and we find that P is 0.37, and then we square it to find that it's 14%, which is the homozygous dominant. How do you tell if a species truly evolved or truly remained at equilibrium? There are many signs of evidence, such as fossils. Homologous structures are body structures in different organisms that evolved from the same type of tissues, showing evolutionary relationships. You can also see a succession of organisms through fossil records to see how each species either went through change from the 5 factors mentioned or stayed constant at equilibrium, such as the fish fossil. We may compare the fish's bone structure to other species to see if one organism is ancestor of another. Produced by Tasneem Arousa Aisha. Evolve it.